All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Today, I don't even know what's going on today. How about that? I don't even know what's happening today, but I got 17 trillion stories in front of me, and we're going to dive into all of them. So, another very, very sad character is going to run for president. A man by the name of Tim Scott. If you don't know who that is, it's okay. He doesn't even know who he is. We got awesome Biden gaffes later on in the show. Hilarious. We have one of the top investment firms in the world is now out there like, capitalism sort of on shaky ground might implode. I think it's kind of unprecedented, the fact that that a really old school famous investment bank is saying stuff like that. And Hitler apologetics from the red pill community. So sit back, relax, buckle up, sip a nice ice cold lemonade, whatever it is you do. All right, let's dive into it. Oh, shameless plugs. Everybody click the like button, click the subscribe button. We crossed that million sub threshold. Trying to get to 2 million, man. Trying to get to 2 million, but it's probably going to take roughly 14 trillion years. But if you click that subscribe button, you get us there closer. And remember, you can listen to the full shows on Spotify if you want to listen to the audio version of the podcast, and support the show on Patreon and Substack. Links in the video description box below. All right, let's do it. So we discussed the other day, there were some new leaks about a variety of different topics. And it turns out, I think it was the New York Times or the Washington Post were able to figure out who the leaker was. It was basically this 21-year-old guy. He kind of leaked all the information just to show off to his buddies online. So, look, this is no Julian Assange. This is no Edward Snowden. This is no Chelsea Manning. This is not somebody who's ideological and is a whistleblower and is saying, I have a conscience and I must expose this stuff. But having said that, I mean, most of the stuff that was leaked here really shouldn't have been classified anyway. I mean, one of the big problems we have is overclassification, as you guys know. The things that are super important to classify, like, for example, Trump took a bunch of those things, and Lord only knows what he was doing with them. I mean, my speculation is he was probably selling some of the information to Saudi Arabia. But here we have stuff that he just posted it online in, was it like a Minecraft forum or something like that? I'm blanking on what specifically it was. And then eventually it made its way to social media, and it was out there. And we talked about them. We didn't talk too much about them, though, because most of the stuff, honestly, I just kind of filed under the duh category, right? Like, one of the things we learned is that Ukraine is not doing as well in the war as the media in the West is portraying it. That was one of the big things that we learned. The other thing is, Mossad in Israel was backing the protests of Netanyahu's Supreme Court takeover, which is interesting, but also, doesn't change the fact that Netanyahu is trying to do an authoritarian takeover and limit the courts, which are a check on the Knesset's power and his power. So the protests are good regardless of who's supporting them. So, I mean, that's anyway, that's a side point. But here we have, this is a leak that I actually think is super important. This is probably the most important leak, in my opinion. Ukraine war. Leak shows Western special forces on the ground. Oh boy. So this is in the BBC. They say the UK is among a number of countries with military special forces operating inside Ukraine, according to one of dozens of documents leaked online. It confirms what has been the subject of quiet speculation for over a year. The leaked files, some marked top secret, paint a detailed picture of the war in Ukraine, including sensitive details of Ukraine's preparations for a spring counteroffensive. The U.S. government says it is investigating the source of the leak. According to the document dated the 23rd of March, the UK has the largest contingent of special forces in Ukraine, 50, followed by fellow NATO states Latvia 17, France 15, the US 14, and the Netherlands 1. The document does not say where the forces are located or what they are doing. The number of personnel may be small and will doubtless fluctuate, but special forces are by their very nature highly effective. Their presence in Ukraine is likely to be seized upon by Moscow, which has in recent months argued that it is not just confronting Ukraine, but NATO as well. In line with its standard policy on such matters, the UK Ministry of Defense has not commented, but in a tweet on Tuesday said the leak of alleged classified information had demonstrated what it called a serious level of inaccuracy. Readers should be cautious about taking at face value allegations that have the potential to spread misinformation. It did not elaborate or suggest which specific documents it was referring to. However, Pentagon officials are quoted as saying the documents are real. One document, which detailed the number of casualties suffered in Ukraine on both sides, did appear to have been doctored. So, guys, this is an important point. And it's another reason why I didn't get into like the super specifics of all the documents, is because this happened with some WikiLeaks stuff too. Some people had doctored some things and put it out there and and acted like it was part of a WikiLeaks dump, and it just wasn't. So, a lot of people were fooled by that. Now, there were other WikiLeaks documents. I'm going back in the past now to the DNC documents, during Bernie versus Hillary, the primary. Now, a lot of it was real. Most of it was real. In fact, there were only a handful of doctored documents. But in the time, nobody really knew what's real, what's not. It took a while to sort of get to conclusions on that. And so to jump the gun and spread something that's wrong, I find that highly problematic. Now, in this case, similar deal. So, like, a lot of this stuff is real. In fact, I already brought up some of the facts and told you some of the facts that we know are real. But there, I guess, were a handful of things that were not real, right? And so in the heat of the moment, people sometimes can mess up, which is understandable. But I think everybody's got to kind of do their due diligence in the process of going through this stuff. UK Special Forces are made up of several elite military units with distinct areas of expertise and are regarded to be among the most capable in the world. The British government has a policy of not commenting on its special forces, in contrast to other countries, including the US. The UK has been vociferous in its support of Ukraine and is the second largest donor after the US military aid to Kyiv. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the Department of Justice had opened a criminal investigation, and he was determined to find the source of the leak. We will continue to investigate and turn over every rock until we find the source of this and the extent of it. Okay, so now, look, since this article came out, they did find the leaker, but it wasn't the U.S. government. It was actually the U.S. media. And if you look at the commentary from the U.S. media, it's actually super disturbing because they're all, like Morning Joe had on a CIA guy, and the CIA guy was like, we must stop this, no. And they just uncritically parrot that. And it was very clear that U.S. media was in lockstep with the U.S. deep state and try to snuff out any discussion of any of this stuff or any coverage of any of this stuff. And obviously with the U.S. media identifying who this was and making it so this guy's going to suffer some serious consequences, it just goes to show you that's not like you're not doing the job of journalism and reporting. Like the job of a journalist and a reporter is to take the documents, go through them with a fine-tooth comb, find the things that are legitimate and find the things that are real, and also find the things that it's fair to report without actually crossing a line for something that should actually be classified, right? And then you run with it. And I know, as a matter of fact, Crystal and Sagar over at Breaking Points, when these documents came out, I remember the night it came out, Crystal was going through all of them with a fine-tooth comb and trying to figure out what's real, what's not real, what can we report, what can we not report. It's a detailed thing you have to do. That's the way a real journalist or reporter handles this stuff. But U.S. media did not do that at all. They were on the side of the CIA, of the FBI, of the U.S. deep state, of UK Special Forces, of U.S. It was just whatever the government said, they're like, yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. And it just shows how pathetic they are. But look, I'm burying the lead here. The most important point is, so now it's verified we have U.S. forces, or U.S. Special Forces, UK Special Forces, NATO Special Forces. They're on the ground in Ukraine. Look, that's a terrifying state of affairs. And, I know I have to explain why, but the fact that I even have to explain it is kind of concerning because it's like, really? People don't see the problem with that? It is a direct escalation with Russia. And, we're opening the door now. Maybe they'll retaliate in one way or another way, and then maybe we'll retaliate again. This tit for tat, which has led to giant escalations. If you had said, when this first happened, when Russia first invaded Ukraine and the U.S. was very carefully plotting like how to help Ukraine and all that stuff, if you had went back to then and told everybody, oh, by the way, U.S. and UK Special Forces are going to be on the ground in Ukraine helping fight Russia, everybody back then, it would have been unanimous. 100% of people would be like, too far. And just to be clear, there are plenty of people who say, and still do, like, aid Ukraine for their defense however possible, right? So, like, give them money, give them weapons, give them support, give them as much help as humanly possible. There are many people who take that position while also saying, hey, man, U.S. Special Forces, UK Special Forces on the ground fighting Russia in Ukraine. That is a bridge too far. Why? Because that is literal hot war type stuff. It opens the door for retaliation, and we are absolutely flirting with World War III, if not engaged in an act of World War III, which I know sounds insane to say, but look, if the shoe was on the other foot, how would we react, right? If there were Russian forces that were on the ground in a place where we're waging a war and Russian special forces are like targeting and killing U.S. soldiers, or at least even helping with intelligence or logistics against U.S. soldiers, we would view that as a literal act of war. And all bets would be off. And that's terrifying when you're dealing with Russia, a massive nuclear power, and the U.S., a massive nuclear power. Like, the way that we've sort of blindly moved forward and escalated to the point where we get news like this, I don't think the adults are in charge. I don't think anybody really knows what they're doing here. And I don't think they fully comprehend the potential consequences of actions like this. And to me, that's terrifying. And it reminds me of all these Republican politicians who've been going on TV basically calling for war with Mexico in a very straightforward way. And you look at that and you go, who's going to go fight the war, right? Like, what do you want young American men and women from lower income houses to, like, hey, just go be cannon fodder for me so I can be a tough guy, macho man politician and act like, I'm standing up to the drug cartels or whatever. I just think they're so willy-nilly and nonchalant and blasé about this incredibly terrifying prospect. And in the case of Russia, this is exactly what everybody was warning about from the very beginning. I mean, Joe Biden himself was like, look, we're going to help Ukraine, but let me be clear, we're not going to give you fighter jets. We're not going to give you long-range weapons so that you can shoot back into Russia, because he was very careful to say, let's do nothing that can be viewed as an escalation. Let's do everything that's a tit for tat. So it's like Russia started it. Russia's doing all these things. We will respond in a tit for tat way to be logical about it, where they can't misinterpret this as an escalation. So it's doesn't open the door to further conflict or escalating conflict. That was the original position of everybody. But then now it's been tit for tat escalation to the point where we have special forces on the ground, us and our allies fighting Russia. That's literally, a hair follicle's length away from just having U.S. troops on the ground, like, full U.S. troops, infantry, just thousands of American boots on the ground, like, directly confronting Russia. What then, man? What then? So it's a terrifying scenario. It's a terrifying scenario. And instead of the media talking about this and saying, like, hey, now, let's, by the way, there's been no debate over this, right? There's been no debate over, there's been no, has Congress voted on this? No, they haven't. So this is illegal. This is unconstitutional. But by the way, even if they did vote on it, you know what would happen? We know, because the blind mania, similar to the Iraq War style mania, where they'd be like, yeah, just vote for it. Not even realizing, again, you're signing up for World War III quite literally here. So, look, my position on Ukraine has been pretty simple every step of the way. There is no doubt Russia is the aggressor. They illegally and offensively invaded a country that didn't attack them. That's what happened. Now, you could say that, there was NATO provocation every step of the way by moving towards Russia's border. I think that's fair, but I think it's psychotic to pretend like, what, NATO was going to offensively overthrow Vladimir Putin? Because that's the argument Putin would have to make to justify his invasion, right? Like, hey, man, I was being purely defensive because NATO was about to overthrow me. But everybody knows that. Of course that wasn't going to happen. If you believe that, you're out of your goddamn mind. So my position is clear. Russia is the aggressor. It's an illegal and offensive war. And I do think, by the way, it has a lot to do with natural gas and oil, which was found off the coast of Crimea and found all throughout Ukraine, right? Russia wants to get their hands on that. And Putin has said, I don't view Ukraine as a real country. He basically wants to resurrect a version of the Russian Empire. And so I understand the idea that you want to give them a fighting chance to defend themselves, right? But to what extent are we going to be involved, the United States? Because the more we are involved, the more we're flirting with a direct conflict with another nuclear-armed power, and that's something nobody wants. But we've effectively sleepwalked. I don't know how to say it properly in this context. We've casually tripped over our dicks and wound up in direct military conflict. And instead of the media sounding the alarm on that and saying, hey now, let's think this, what are they doing? They're attacking the leaker. Now, again, the guy didn't have an ideological reason. He wasn't a whistleblower. That's very clear based on all the facts of the situation. He was just trying to impress his friends. But having said that, most of this stuff shouldn't be classified anyway, and he's done a great service by basically teaching us what's going on with our money and in our name. And so it's a scary moment, man. It's a very, very scary moment. And this is probably the most important leak, and it's something that everybody should look at and say, can't have it. Can't have it. You could be as pro-Ukraine as you want. You can want to help them as much as possible, but to have NATO, US, UK special forces on the ground, even if it's just helping logistically, it's too much of a risk. What happens if one of them gets killed by the Russian military or by, a missile gone awry? What happens if one of them kills a Russian soldier on purpose, by accident, whatever? What happens? What happens? This is the closest we've been to annihilation since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I mean, I know it sounds hyperbolic, but if you think it's hyperbolic, you just don't follow geopolitics closely enough, because that's real. It's as real as a heart attack. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.